Hey everyone, just want to encourage you to find us on your listening platform and give us a rating. Anywhere you listen to that has a rating system, go on over and give us a rating and maybe leave us a review. Let us know your thoughts. These ratings really do help. Thank you so much for listening. On to this week's episode. So it's our final episode for this year's Halloween spooky season. And I'm going to start off with a rather unusual question. You might wonder where I'm going with this, but stay with me. Okay. For going to the movies, everybody has a genre that they like to go to the movies to see, whether it's comedy, horror, action, etc., right? Mm-hmm. What's your guys' favorite type of movie to go to the theater and see with a big crowd?
I'll tell you what I don't want to see with a big crowd ever again, and that's a horror movie. Because the last horror films I've seen, I feel like the audience, it just ruins it.
How did they ruin it this time?
Well, they won't. Last horror movie I went to see in a theater was Smile 2. And I kid you not, there was a woman who just refused to shut up. She was making comments throughout the entirety of the film. Like, I forgot the main character's name, but like Naomi Scott.
Sky Riley,
Naomi, right?
Yeah.
Sky Riley, yeah. So it's like, no, Sky, don't do that. Sky, it's just like, shut the fuck up, woman. It was annoying. And then she had the audacity to be making comments whilst being on her phone looking at Instagrams.
Wow, so she was like Brenda from Scary Movie?
She truly was like Brenda from Scary Movie. And honestly, I understand now in that scene why people wanted to murder her. I was ready to. Eddie stopped me from making a scene, but then some other guy went up to tell her to shut up. Did she? No, she did not.
Wow, she was unstoppable. Yeah. Okay, all right. Well, but I also remember when you don't want to see.
Well, yeah, because prior to that, I think we also saw Speak No Evil. And I feel like that one also had like kind of an audience that was kind of just like annoying me. So, you know, I'm kind of, it's just like, okay, horror is definitely not it. Action movies, I feel like are good ones to see in theaters. Spectacle.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So action movie would be yours. What about you, Eddie?
I love to see like big action, especially sci-fi action in
I think sci-fi is another good one to see in theater.
Now, though, is it because the projection and the sound, or is it the people?
No, it's never the people. It's for me, it's never the audience. Like, I know you love theater as a communal experience. I don't.
Yeah, so I think I actually enjoyed a lot of the Marvel movies with people. Especially coming to the end. Like, I saw, which one did I see? I saw the very last one, Endgame. I saw Endgame. What was the one before Endgame? Wait, what was the one they all turned into dust?
Infinity War, yeah.
Spoiler alert.
So I saw that one 3 times in that weekend. With 3 different friends. And it was 3 different audience experiences. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was so fun.
Spectacle. Yeah. I think that's another one where spectacle is important also.
Yeah, I think sometimes a movie experience can absolutely make or break, in Rolando's case, our impressions of the film and our overall enjoyment of them. I think that when it comes to watching movies in the theater, like I would say comedy or horror, just recently saw Anora in theaters with a huge audience. I was laughing, so it added so much to it. I also saw Smile 2 with an audience that included some people who couldn't shut the fuck up and a lot of people who were very much reacting to the movie. But I think that out of all of the genres, in a weird way, horror is kind of the most valued in a theater in a way, because the experience is just not the same at home with the lights on, with the lights off, with your phone there, with bathroom breaks, all that stuff. That whole environment of watching a movie at home, unless you're with a big group of people, doesn't really benefit the horror genre. And this comes into play with the fact that many horror films have went straight to streaming this year, including the one that we're talking about this year, today, for our final episode of Halloween, which is the very, very long delayed Salem's Lot, which was also a miniseries in the 70s. Why it was long delayed, we'll get into, and we'll get into our opinions on this movie and why maybe a movie theater experience could have benefited this film. Who knows? maybe not.
As we all shake our heads.
We just me and Eddie just very much like looked at Nicole like being like, "Girl, you smoking something if you think that."
Yeah, trying to be nice.
Salvaged by a audience.
This movie should have been shelved like Batgirl, perhaps.
You know what? We'll get into that for sure.
So I'm Nicole.
I'm Rolando.
And I'm Eddie Z.
And this is Remakes, Reboots, and Revivals.
An original podcast
about unoriginality.
Now, Nicole, I do want to come at you a little bit real quick because I disagree with you. I think I actually do prefer seeing horror movies at home, usually with or with Eddie, like my spouse, right? But I love seeing like a horror movie at home with the lights off. Like, I think I feel like horror movie tends to be way more intimate, and you want to be with like just like in under the covers with your partner or paramour and be scared together, right? I remember we saw Hush together when we were away in Cape Cod in a house that we've never been in together, and lights were off, and any little sound that the house would make, we were convinced was like a murderer trying to get us, right? And that's an experience that's only heightened because we were just watching that movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think, I think horror movies are way more fun to see. Like, that's why I think they should be going straight to streaming, much like the rom-com, in my opinion.
So that's interesting, yeah, because rom-coms definitely have been straight to streaming. And so has comedy, which is kind of a lost genre in the theater. In that scenario, it's a fantastic scenario for at-home movie watching. But that's also assuming that a lot of people do that. And we all know that people kind of nowadays half-watch while scrolling on their phone or tasking or making dinner, etc.
Well, I mean, I was literally just Smile too, and someone was half watching. Two people were half watching, right? Not just the one lady who would not shut up, but also, I kid you not, like a few seats away from her, someone else was just literally just on TikTok or Facebook.
I think they were all together. I think there was a group that was all together.
Well, you know what? The generation, it's lost. The art of movie going is lost to this generation. Right?
The art
I sound like such an old man.
Something for a prolonged period of time is definitely, it's gone. So we should definitely mourn that. But let's get into today. Really true.
Oh, actually, wait, yeah, this is true because I teach college students, right? You do too, Nicole. But do you have a hard time getting them to focus even on a short film?
When it comes to watching things, particularly older things, yes.
Yeah, oh my god!
If they are more hands-on with stuff, they're good, but they're always taking out their phone every 5 seconds.
Yeah, it is crazy. It's just like I'm constantly telling them to like put that shit away. Yes, I say shit. I'm like sometimes ready to just fucking pick up their phone and just throw it across the room. I get so frustrated.
I know some people
get
some
like a
are
bad
good,
review on
better than others, but some people have like some have a really, really hard problem, and it's reality.
It's crazy.
It's disheartening.
Mm-hmm.
So so today, Salem Slot. So
what a wonderful segue.
Right? Thank you. This is about our 5th Stephen King episode.
Is it really? That means it's Pet Sematary.
Yes.
What else?
It's the only one you remember.
It Follows.
Well, not It Follows, but yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just It. You're not It, but you're right. Which other ones are there?
So you probably don't remember because a lot of these didn't end up being great films, but we did. I'm sorry, Dr. Sleep. That's the name of it.
I like Dr. Sleep.
The Shining, Dr. Sleep.
Yeah.
The long-awaited one, and of course, everyone's favorite Firestarter. We did.
Oh God, that was so bad. That was a fire starter. That should have been kindling. Is what we should have used that movie for.
And we did, which was great. I thought the Pet Sematary.
Yes. I mean, that was only good because of John Lithgow's performance. Like truly, like he's the most memorable thing I think in that movie.
Yeah.
Oh my God, he was in that. Oh my God, he was the star of that. Yeah, Nicole, you put respect to his name.
Okay, calm down. Stephen King, huge American icon of horror literature, of suspense, crime, sci-fi, etc. And Hollywood has always had, ever since the success of Carrie, his first book, And his first movie adaptation, he's just been the biggest name when it comes to alive authors that we adapt into cinema and television.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty quickly, this is amongst some of the first things that ever came out that was Stephen King. So this is before he was, like, let's say, established as a household name, because I think we can all agree he's a household name.
Yo, yeah. I mean, come on. He wrote On Writing.
Yeah. So, and this is only his second book.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah. His first 3 books are Carrie, Salem's Lot, and The Shining, which is a pretty impressive first 3 books.
Those are impressive. Yes,
or at least his first 3 released. Yeah. So Carrie came out in 1974 as a book. Movie came out in 1976. Salem's Lot came out as a book in 1975. The miniseries was in 1979. The Shining came out in 1977. And by 1980, that movie happened. That's like unheard of now when it comes to authors. I don't even think outside of, things Hunger like Harry Games? Potter or Twilight, we don't really have authors like that. Do you know the name of the author of The Hunger Games?
Oh, off the top of my head, I don't. But I know that she gets exclusivity of the movies that she writes go right to the studio for.
I know her first name is like Susanna, right? Susanna?
I think you're right. Susanna Prescott?
No.
I always thought it was like Suzanne Collins or something. But
I think it is Suzanne Collins or Susanna Collins. Well, all right.
Collins, like yes. Suzanne Collins.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Point is that not a household name. J.K. Rowling's a household name, but that's
her properties are a household name. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if she is, it's probably for the wrong reasons now. But it's just kind of his...
I meant Susanna Collins in terms of...
Susanna. Yeah. Yes.
What about, what's it called? The guy who wrote Jurassic Park.
Michael Crichton. That's a good one. Michael Crichton. That's a very good one. He's kind of a household name.
Dean Koontz.
Who? James Patterson is probably like the biggest.
James Patterson.
Yeah, a lot of people know who he is.
Who's the one who wrote the movie now that's like everyone's going crazy for with Blake Lively?
Colleen Hoover. Yeah,
Colleen Hoover. Yeah, that's another household name in terms of like authors and stuff. So we have a few of them still. They're there.
Yeah.
I mean, look, that Colleen Hoover movie. I mean, I'm sure all her things are going to be now IP because that movie made so much money.
It really did, but also it got a lot of publicity.
It's not. I was going to call it a rom-com. It's not a rom-com, but for a
no, it's definitely not. Even though it's sort of
it was marketed as such. Yeah. But,
okay, Salem's Lot was pretty much acquired by Warner Brothers, and they wanted to make it into a feature film, I suppose, after the success of Carrie. But the people, a lot of people kind of submitted screenplays to the producers who had acquired the rights, and they tossed out like all these different versions until they decided that it would serve itself better as a miniseries.
Mm-hmm.
And so Warner Brothers pretty much commissioned it, and they got a filmmaker named Tobe Hooper, never was able to say his name correctly. It's one of those, to direct it. Now, Hooper, I'll just call him Hooper, is best known for directing The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which has just been announced as the greatest horror film of all time by Variety. So
what?
Yeah. Variety called that number 1. A lot of people disagree.
No.
It is what it is. But he also directed Poltergeist.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, I thought Poltergeist was Steven Spielberg.
That was produced by Steven Spielberg. It is by him.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. He also made The Funhouse, Life Force, Eaten Alive, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. I mean, just like a bunch of movies, but his most well-known is Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
You would not...
And yeah.
Oh, I was going to say Poltergeist is pretty much a iconic movie. Like
it is.
More so, I would say more so than Texas Chainsaw.
You think so? Because within the horror movie world, Texas Chainsaw is pretty beloved.
Oh, I think Poltergeist transcends the horror genre. I think it actually is just a good movie.
Yeah, Poltergeist is a little more mainstream. Although I don't know. Like, everyone knows it, even if they haven't seen it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's pretty much all I got in terms of the backstory. I mean, they hired some of the greatest actors of the time, which are more so, some of them are character actors. Like the guy who plays the gravedigger, I think his name is Ryerson. I can't tell you how many times I've seen him in movies. That actor's name is Jeffrey Lewis. Fred Willard, a young Fred Willard who would grow up to be in the Christopher Guest movies, was also in this, is Larry Crockett. Lou Ayres is a huge name. Bonnie Bartlett and Bonnie Bedelia were big stars back then. Elijah Cook Jr. also, fucking love that guy. But the big one,
and any of these names,
yeah, you don't
Fred
know
Willard was
people,
the only famous person I knew.
Yeah, from the 70s though, these were people that people were seeing in movies and they've seen in television shows before that. The big name though is the guy who plays Richard Straker, and that's James Mason. Of course, we'll get into these characters in a second, but James Mason is one of my absolute favorite actors of old Hollywood, and probably one of the best things about this miniseries.
He was good. Straker, Straker was
in terms of a Straker
was good. I wish he had a little bit more of a presence, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree too, and I do think that in a lot of ways this piece didn't really serve him, although he was perfectly casted. But we'll get into that in just a second. We're not going to talk about the books because we compare media properties here. So for people who have read the books, we apologize, but this is not the podcast for you if you're looking for that. I will say though,
thank you for saying that, because God, we were skewered for Interview with the Vampire.
We clearly stated that in the beginning, so people just wanted to give us shit, and people always want that. There were some substantial deviations, pretty much. The big one being Barlow. Did you know that?
Barlow? What about him?
That he's actually not like this Nosferatu type creature. He's more of a human-like person who
interesting. I
can speak.
Did not know that. I actually... I thought that he was... Yeah, I thought... Because both iterations of the film would kind of show him as like kind of a Nosferatu type of creature and stuff.
Yes.
Can we just get this out of the way and just say that like this story does feel very derivative though of Dracula?
Well, it kind of is. You know, one of my favorite authors right now, his name is Grady Hendrix. And every year or so, he puts out a new book that's his version of a classic type of trope in horror. Mm-hmm. He wrote My Best Friend's Exorcism, which was his version of a possession story. He wrote Southern Book Club to Sing Vampires, his version of a vampire story. He did How to Sell a Haunted House, his version of a haunted house story, right? If you kind of look at especially the beginning of Stephen King, that's kind of what he did. Mm-hmm. And Salem's Lot is Stephen King's version of a vampire story. Mm-hmm. And it's a very classical approach to it. You know, there's not too much of a deviation, at least from what we can tell in the media portrayals. He focuses a lot on character and suspense to, you know, kind of like what's going on, or are you figuring out what's going on and then hoping that people will either figure it out or get the fuck out. Right. But it's interesting because we have to put ourselves in the mind frame too, especially with the first one, of the 70s, right? Yes. When movies were shown like once a week on television, but other than that, you had to go to the theater to see it. If you wanted to see Dracula, you had to wait for the revival of it at your local movie theater. And this was just a different time for media intake. And this is one we have to revisit throughout this episode in terms of when stories get told in our pop culture, because I think that's going to overall impact our reading on the second one. So stories are pretty much based the same for both, but they deviate in some ways. Rolando, can you just really kind of sum it up for our viewers? You do such a great, for our listeners, sorry, you do such a great job at it. So I'm going to hand it to you.
Oh, thank you. So the story of Salem's Lot is a writer who used to live in Jerusalem's Lot. That's the name of the town. He comes home to do research on a project that he's working on. He's a writer. Eddie tells me he's struggling. I thought he was like a Stephen King-esque type writer, but apparently he's a struggling writer. Hasn't found his niche just yet. And while in town, he ends up dating a young lady from town. Meanwhile, while their budding relationship is starting to take off, kids start going missing, start showing up dead, and other locals mysteriously start dying around town. And all this is connected to Straker, who owns a new antique shop in town, who has come to town with his benefactor, Barlow. And
it's the elusive Barlow.
The elusive Barlow. And surprise, surprise, it turns out Barlow is actually a ancient vampire who is seeking to infect Salem's Lot with vampirism. And it falls onto a child named Michael. The writer I forgot the writer's name.
Ben Mears.
Ben Mears, thank you. It follows on Ben Mears and a child named Michael to try to stop this, what's it called, vampires plague from, spreading. And each film kind of tackles how we get to that outcome differently.
Pretty much, yes. Excellent. Should we do one by one, or should we combine our opinions on both? How do you guys
Let's
feel?
do one by one, because I think one is stronger than the other, and that might be the best way of tackling it.
I hope we agree on that. Okay, yeah. So first is 1979's miniseries, which now is a 3-hour film, pretty much on HBO Max, and I love every time it goes to commercial. It's just
you can tell, right? The cut to black.
Yeah.
But it's like the way they used to do it in the 70s and 80s, and they just don't make commercial breaks like that anymore. It was very, in a weird way, nostalgic. Didn't grow up in the 70s, but I've watched so many things from that era. So what's nice about this too is that the way it opens, actually, they always say when you go to writing school or you learn how to write a story, etc., they sometimes say start from the middle or start from the end and then work your way back. And how you got to that point. It keeps an audience member more engaged.
Which we literally did. We started at the ending.
They literally did. These two men, which we come to learn are Ben Mears and Mark Petrie, they're in a church, not in Jerusalem's lot, elsewhere, and they're filling up bottles of water with holy water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are they in Mexico?
I think they're in Ecuador.
Yeah, they're somewhere in Latin America, maybe Central, maybe South America. They've went a long way from Maine, which, by the way, just like a lot of other early Stephen King works, or just probably outside of early works, this takes place in a fictional town in Maine, which is Jerusalem's lot. And most of his stories do take place in Maine. Hello. Yeah. Next to Castle Rock and Derry.
He does say, write what you know, right? Like,
yes, exactly. So from Maine to Central America, they look like they're worn out and war-torn, to be more precise. And they realize when they are filling up their bottles with holy water that it starts emitting this light. And they're like, oh my God, they found us again. Mm-hmm. And then we cut back to 2 years later when Ben Mears first comes. Yeah, 2 years. I'm sorry. Thank you. 2 years earlier when Ben Mears first returns to Jerusalem's lot. And it's interesting because this miniseries, it really takes its time.
Oh, yeah. I was surprised. Like, because as I am one to do, watching it backwards, no vampires show up until like a good hour into this miniseries. So we're talking one third of this 3-hour film. I'm assuming the way it was broken up in as a miniseries was an hour and a half is one episode, one night, and then the other hour and a half is the other, right? Unless it did 1 hour, 1 hour, 1 hour, but I'm guessing it was 1 hour and a half. Yeah. And so that is a bold move to make the first night be almost 2/3 of it non-vampiric. But I guess people like
all about that build-up.
Yes, they really took their time like introducing us to the characters, which makes sense because I think part of the appeal of the story is just like how once some action starts going, they start dropping like flies pretty quickly, and you kind of need to have a little bit of a connection with some of these characters, otherwise it just will not hit.
No, absolutely, and they even like put characters together and got rid of characters from the book. So they even brought it down to this 3-hour piece. And when I say it takes its time, it introduces you to a lot of characters and their backstory. My particular favorite being the guy whose wife is cheating on him in that whole scene that happens with Fred Willard. Yeah,
with Fred Willard. Which
I'm like, wow, I'm really watching this.
I was watching them just like, this feels so unrelated to like the main plot, which is vampires. But okay, here we are, I guess.
Yeah. And also that scene lasts for a while, which is most of this film. Like every film, every scene takes its time. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's like, okay, she walks up the stairs, she opens the door to the Marston house, she walks in, she looks around, it's like, we could trim some of this down. I know now it's a mini-series. But...
When the sheriff is calling in to make the connections with the names, and he's literally spelling out the characters' names, and it's just like, conventional Hollywood tells us we don't need this right here. Like we can condense this down.
But I mean, it's nice because, again, you get to know everybody. Although I will say I got a little bit of face blindness because everyone's white and they all kind of look alike. And unless they were a character actor that I had established, like that I knew, like Elijah Cook Jr. or Jeffrey Lewis, I was like, wait, who's this again? It took a while for me to like. Yeah, the kids.
Yeah, the two kids, like Ralphie and the other Wick child. Like I could not tell them apart. So I was just like, which one's dead? Which one is it? Okay. I think it's the younger one who dies first.
Danny Glick? Yeah.
Yeah, Danny Glick is the older brother.
He's the older brother. Okay.
Ralphie died.
Ralphie's the first one to disappear.
Ralphie dies first, yeah.
Ralphie always is the first to be sacrificed to the vampire.
Yeah. Now, what do you think about the portrayal of vampires?
So it's so funny that we are watching this because another book series / TV show series that also follows this similar plot is The Strain on FX. I'm rewatching it because it was Halloweenish and it's like a vampiric kind of story by Guillermo del Toro. It's based off of his book series, right? And similar thing, right? A wealthy benefactor from Europe brings a vampiric lord to the new world here in America. And in the case of the show The Strain, it's portrayed more so like a virus kind of situation, which is interesting to watch post-pandemic. But like, you know, it's very tropey. It's like this has become such a common trope, which is just like, you know, the vampire from the old world coming to the new world and like what's it called? Like trying to take over the new world. Even the plot of What We Do in the Shadows, the series, is kind of based off of this idea of like these vampires from Europe who are trying to establish dominance here in the new world and stuff. And I think both. What I was more surprised about is like how kind of preachy it got too caught up in like kind of like the Catholicism of just like holding cross to like get rid of the vampires and stuff, right? Like that was like so important in this film throughout, which I tend to like my vampires to be a little bit a-religious, agnostic, right? Like I prefer them when they're, when they are just, they're not necessarily good or evil. They're just creatures. And this one was very much like, they are very much like evil, right? They get, they get hurt by holy water. They get hurt by the holy cross.
Well, this was also in the 70s when, and I'm not making an exception for it. I'm just saying this is also in the 70s when what we had was Bram Stoker and probably other iterations. This was before also media really took over with their portrayal of vampires. This is before Anne Rice.
That's true. Yeah.
So
this is before Stephanie Meyer's or True Blood.
That's true.
Or Twilight and this idea, but this was the hardcore lore that we kind of all grew up with in this vampire mythology of these things being
allergic to sunlight. They are. I think they also mentioned garlic and can keep them away. Obviously, the holy water, the cross. Lore. Yeah, like this is like very classic, very, very old school mythology, right? I think the only thing missing was silver. Oh, they like to kill them is a stake through the heart, for example, a wooden stake.
Yes, the big one, yeah. Which is important though, because again, audiences at this time, they needed that sense of familiarity in order for it to sink in and be as scary as it was. And I'm sure being a kid staying up late and watching like Ralphie floating out the window and trying to lure his brother to death, that must have been scary.
I will say this. I do appreciate the special effects. I think for a TV show, like a TV miniseries, they actually look pretty good. Like you have to be very cognizant of the limitations in budget for a miniseries versus an actual theatrical release. And for a miniseries, I actually thought, this actually looks pretty good. Like this, like, okay, like could we have lit things a little differently? Yeah, but like they're lighting for TV and stuff, so makes sense. I actually thought they looked good.
Oh yeah, I think the Ralphie outside his brother's window was some of my favorite sequences. Most of my favorite sequences involved vampires. It just felt so dreamy, so trance-like, and that's it. That's how you're supposed to feel by vampires, and it really did a good job making you feel that way. And then all of a sudden, the quick bite on the neck too.
Yeah. So my favorite effect was actually when. I was gonna say when Barlow, he's like the shroud, and then like it turns into like the human form when he kills Mike's parents.
Yes.
Yeah, like I thought, like again, I was just like, again, they're working with their limitations. They're figuring out how to do it as effectively as possible, and I think it's just like, you know what, this worked.
Yeah, when the whole room shakes, and then all of a sudden he comes through the window, and then he slowly becomes a form, and that whole scene with the priest too, I was like, oh damn, that's messed up. My other favorite scene being the Glick's mom, and they're at the morgue. I actually thought this was funny. And then she turns into a vampire, puts the cross on her, she reacts, and then she goes to dust, except what happens is that she slowly cross dissolves and fades.
Yeah.
And then there's smoke, but then like some extra or some crew member tipped the table over. Do you remember that? Like
that I don't
the way
remember.
they did that effect was a little slow, and I thought it was. This is a 2024 perspective, but I thought it was actually very funny.
Of course, I'm sure back then, like to this 1970s sensibilities, I was just like, "Oh my god, terrifying!"
Where did she go?
Yeah.
Well, the more successful one is Barlow's death when his body starts decaying. That was great.
Yeah. No,
so,
I think effects. I actually found myself like, this is, dare I say, cute. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's solid. I thought it was a little too long.
Oh, most certainly. I could tell you, we could trim that first hour.
Didn't need. I know they were convinced it needed to be a miniseries. Didn't, but also like a lot of those scenes could move faster.
Like they really harped on the relationship between
Ben and Susan.
Yeah, like it was just like a little bit too. It's just like, Jesus, they're not like, I wasn't that invested in their relationship, to be quite honest. You know what I mean?
I know, but
yeah, well, they were both pretty bland.
A little bit, yeah. Eddie, I'm sorry, what were you saying?
It's something interesting to think of, like what that generation watching this needed in processing stories like this. What was more attractive, like the slow burn, this couple that was so kind of vanilla. At the same time, they indicated that they were not really vanilla because they would go to the lake, and everybody goes, you go to the lake to
mess
fuck
around. Yeah, it's true.
You know,
that's right.
To do that, right? So it is this like that. I saw there was a moment where when he heard the car, when we found the first body, and she tucked in her shirt. You know, that's very much indication of like, oh wow, they must have been. You know, that little thing is indicating something inappropriate.
That's
happened.
right. She's a vampiric harlot.
You know, but I just found everyone's. Like, I even found the introduction of Ben creepy.
Go on.
Like, very lurky, you know? Like, not knowing, of course, he was attracted to the house and because he felt this way, but his inability to...
Take no for an answer?
What do you mean?
Is that when you talk about? Are you talking about when he asked the realtor about the house and he kept insisting on this house and the realtor just like, it's not available? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, well, but stuff like that. But that, okay, that's creepy, right? But also like him like lurking there and just him not like smiling and always kind of being starey. Yeah, you know, just be staring at people, and you know, until you get to know Ben, if you have no indication, it's like this guy's kind of creepy himself. And I was like, oh, yeah. Even this character, even this version didn't work for me. Like I didn't care about the main character.
Now, is this character based off of like Stephen King is a writer from New England? Like, is he Mary Sueing here?
Perhaps.
Like, is this how Stephen King would behave? He imagines himself to behave in a vampiric storyline,
or
and I'm not asking to make fun of him. I'm just asking literally, just like I'm just asking.
Because we didn't do any research in this particular area, since we didn't read the books, we don't know how he presented Ben.
That's true. Good point.
Because Ben could have been presented very tortured and very thoughtful, you know, and you as a reader are getting a totally different guy. But what people interpret from the outside looking in is, why is this guy lurking? Yeah. Why is he so creepy? You know, you also get lurky. You say these things now, but back then it was probably mysterious. And he's such a stranger from the city, you know, so attractive, you know. And I love the way his blonde hair just flips to the side like that. You know?
It was in this movie where they talked about Chicago, right? Because like she was planning on going back to Chicago, or was that?
This Boston. No, in the first one, she had an interview in Boston, and he was, you know. Yeah, and it was so also too. I really paid attention to how women were being treated.
Ooh, tell me more. What did you see?
So all I did see though is her apologizing for asking very normal and appropriate questions with someone you're sleeping with. Every time she asks the question and he deflects, she says, "Oh, I'm sorry. I just asked so many questions." I'm like, these are appropriate questions that you need to get answers to. Okay? And actually, you need to ask better questions. Do not apologize for trying to know this guy, all right, who just came out of nowhere. All right? And also, there was another scene because I actually seen this in real life once, where the husband apologizes to the guest for his wife's cooking.
Oh,
where he says, "Oh, I'm sorry about the peas.
Yeah, I do that on
she's
your
usually
behalf all
much
the time.
better.
It's
She's usually much better.
I'm sorry for Eddie's cooking, guys. Like he's usually better.
So
Eddie would murder me.
So, but it's very much to its to its time and what people can process too. And knowing they always cut when a vampire attack is about to happen or it's going to happen, and then cuts a commercial.
I will say the reason they build up the relationship between Mears and Susan is because there's a payoff at the end.
Yeah.
Right. We're supposed to experience a loss, a very profound loss, when she eventually becomes a vampire, right? Which I'm assuming is from the books, because in both iterations of the story, she becomes a vampire.
Yeah.
And, it's always like he has to like kind of, free her.
And I may have missed it, but who killed the dog?
What dog?
Oh my gosh.
Faithful in the cemetery. I don't think...
Isn't it implied to be... Wouldn't it have been Ralphie? Because he's the one who killed the grave digger.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, because like it's the one who kills the grave digger, and it's Ralphie who kills the grave digger.
Okay.
Is it Ralphie or is it Danny?
Danny kills it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Danny.
I forget.
So Ralphie, the little brother, kills the dog.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm pretty sure.
No. Wait, but he's not churned. Oh, only because we get the box with Barlow in it during this whole evening.
That's right. The first hour of the film is one night.
The dog dies in the cemetery just as the guy that's gonna catch his wife cheating leaves. Right? The dog dies just as he leaves.
Yeah.
But these guys are in the process of picking up Barlow.
Oh, yeah. Because, look, I kid you not. The first hour takes place all within one night. And since I watched these in reverse, I'm just like, this scene was like truly like only 5 minutes in the movie. Like, I can't believe we're still here 1 hour into this film of delivering Barlow. Yeah, off the top of my head, I do not remember that.
Okay.
Sorry. But what I do know is that I actually did like this. I actually liked Salem's a lot, like 1970. Like, I'm surprised. It's just like, it's kind of kitschy a little bit. Like, it's just like, look, this was a fun watch. Was it scary for me? No, but I think some of the practical effects were pretty good.
Yeah, no, I think the practical effects are some of the best parts. What'd you think about David Soul's portrayal as Ben?
Which one's Ben?
He's the main character.
Mears, the writer.
Yeah, Mears the writer. Yes, Ben Mears.
I don't know. Like, I was also kind of like over him a little bit, because maybe for me, he just didn't like read Hero like visually, and I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
Like, I think in both of these iterations of the film, right? Like, he doesn't look like your conventional would-be hero in these stories, and I guess it's because he's supposed to be like kind of that like author kind of looking person. Yeah, no, he didn't like. Nothing spoke to me about him. I don't think he captured me in the film. The one who did, I think, did a lot of the carrying though, was the younger kid,
Mark.
Oh, is it Mark? I keep calling him Mike.
It's Mark. I think it's there's Mears, there's Mark, and there's Mike. So that's why you get confused.
Stephen King needs to work on these names a little bit. But I thought he was really good, right? I think he gave a stronger performance and stuff. And I liked him a little bit. Yeah, I liked him better.
Yeah, I really could not connect to Mears at all, as portrayed by Hutch from Starsky and Hutch.
Is that I didn't know that.
That's who David Soul is. And I didn't feel anything about him and Susan's relationship. I also was just like, everyone just felt kind of bland for me. Most of the character actors delivered, because they're just showing up for a couple of scenes and they're giving it a 10. And our main actors are like coming in at a 5. And it's really hard because most of the shots linger a long time, and they linger on Mears, on Susan, on the doctor, Dr. Norton.
Yeah.
So it's just like, my God, this is just, it's fine. It's not necessarily for me. I respect it for what it is, but I don't know if I could say I enjoyed it.
I as I watch these in reverse, I will say this much: I enjoyed it because I had to just see Salem's Lot. I'm just like, oh boy, I need to wash my palate a little bit. But I just want to say this thing: whoever was in the costume for as Barlow was serving, right? Like that was true. Like they were having the time of their lives in that costume. Like just the animated hand movements and stuff. It was so silly and so funny. It was just like well done in my opinion. Because like you know, it's because it does look silly on camera, right? Like this is not like it wasn't scary. So like he's just doing the best he can to really scare you, literally by like raising his arms like ah, like it was just funny.
Yeah,
in my opinion,
I agree.
It was charming. And but yeah, and then let's go back. The one thing I do want to say, the guy who played Straker, I could have used way more of him on camera, and they should have amped up his death scene just a little bit because like he just gets shot and then he's just like and then dies.
Yeah, well, they kind of make him this like unstoppable force that he has to shoot like 5 times in order to die, and then he just sort of collapses. I agree. Someone as epic as him, and just like James Mason coming in at a 10 when everybody else around him is coming in at a 5, and he overall just deserved more. So,
I agree.
Love James Mason.
But yeah.
All right, so
and we can just fast forward now to 2024, right?
Yeah, I think so. Well, first we should fast forward to 2022 when this movie was originally set to be released. I don't know about you guys, but we've been talking about having this on the calendar for a few years now because it's always been something that they're like, it's coming. It's coming. And
when?
It took
no one knows.
Yeah. So it was supposed to be released in September 2022. It got delayed to April 2023, but then it lost its release date to Evil Dead Rise, which we covered instead.
Which I loved. I loved it so much. It was such a fun movie.
It was in the talks to be, which you also enjoyed because you were at the theater. I remember you saying that.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah. That one was heightened by the experience of just people like, because that one worked off of the shock and the gore and like the screams. So okay. Sometimes it works.
Yeah. So anyway, when Discovery and Warner Brothers merged, people were like, oh my God, is this going to be shelved like Batgirl was, like Coyote versus Acme was? It didn't, actually.
I'm shocked.
I know. By October 2023, what were you going to say?
I guess they needed like an October release of some sort. So just like, we need something Halloweenish. So there you go. Just cram it in there.
Which is what they wanted to do last Halloween. And I think it was because of the strike that they didn't.
Oh.
And then they're like, we're holding it back. And then they were like, fuck it, let's just release it in March. And then it comes out in October. So it's been a ridiculous experience for this filmmaker, I'm sure. And it's been long delayed. And here it is to absolutely the cast. To absolutely no acclaim at all, this movie came out. Where were the trailers? Where was the social media push? Where were anything that told people this movie? Just all of a sudden, one day, Salem's Lot is on Max.
Mm-hmm.
And we were like, okay, well, we've had this on the calendar. Yeah, I saw it as a new release. So I was like, let's do it. I'm sorry.
As you should
I'm sorry I insisted on us watching this. And I'm sure we can all agree right now that this movie was not good and it probably should have been shelved.
Feels
so
I don't know.
But
I don't know if that's fair. Like, right, that it should be shelved because the way I like to see it is just like a movie was made, and that is no small feat at the end of the day, right?
It's
like these are people who put work into this. It just wasn't successful. We can dissect though why this film wasn't successful. For me, ultimately, I think one of the reasons the film was not successful though was because where I'm complaining about how slow Salem's Lot, the miniseries is or felt, at least it did give me a connection with some of the characters before they start dying off. Whereas when I'm watching the new one, everything starts happening so fast that I have almost no emotional connection with these characters.
Yeah.
And I'm like kind of left feeling like okay, are they important? Are they not? In fact, and then my other complaint is just like when I actually have a connection with a character and they die, there's no moment of reprieve, right? There's no moment for me to like feel the loss because there's so much action happening. which in my opinion, some of the action was also kind of nonsensical and silly. So this movie follows almost the exact same plot of the original one, just condensed for time. They cram it all into an hour 50. And for an hour 50 long movie, this felt longer. It felt so fast and yet also so long to endure. Why? How? I don't know.
I know. It's pretty remarkable. So it's funny because when we watched Pet Sematary, they deviated a bit. But emphasis on a bit. And we were fans of it. We were like, they made the right choice. You know, they made the right choice because it ended up being more effective in terms of the performances they got and the way they were able to film it. And maybe it's because of that. Gary Dauberman, the filmmaker of this, was like, hey, we can deviate. We can do whatever we want with Salem's Lot. And he kind of took that and ran. Or perhaps, I mean, he wrote the screenplay. You know, he's also responsible for the writing. This movie deviates a lot. And it kind of goes off into its own, especially towards the end.
Oh, maybe towards the end.
Yeah, there's other... Now, again, we don't read the source material, but there's a whole lore that's introduced with the Doctor.
What do you mean?
In terms of how you can stop vampirism.
Oh, are you talking about the rabies shot?
Yeah.
The rabies
I don't know if it
shot,
was I don't know if that was a lore that was introduced. I guess... I mean,
yeah, garlic will kill them. A stake to the heart will kill them, but a rabies shot will stop it.
Because I believe the rabies. Look, you know what? You're right. I don't know how the rabies shots plays, because I was wondering too. It's just like, why is a rabies shot? Why is that her go-to methodology for prevention of spreading the disease? The only thing that I could think of is just like, you know, rabies is typically spread from being bit by an infected animal, and these vampires are infected animals. Yeah. That was the only logic that comes to it. I honestly did not put that much thought into this scene.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, which is important though, because it also it only happens in the first minute of being bitten.
Yes.
Like there's a certain point where it's too late.
Right. We find that out later on.
The moment that you begin any kind of change is like too late. You know.
Yeah.
See, so that's so funny that's what irritated you in that scene, because what irritated me in that scene was the fact that no one could put together a fucking cross with tape. Like, they were struggling so much for a very simple task that anyone could have accomplished just to heighten up this, like, kind of sense of drama and dread, and was kind of just like, this isn't working. This is kind of silly. Like, actually, I did feel, and maybe the reason I didn't think so much of the rabies shot is because, like, okay, I kind of like the Doctor so far. I kind of don't want to see her go just yet.
Yeah. Okay. Things that this movie does well. Changes up the casting. You know, we actually have people of color in this movie. And not only that, but we get women playing really cool and interesting roles other than, say, love interests or mothers.
Yes.
For instance, as the Doctor, it's no longer Susan's father. As in the miniseries, it's not Dr. Norton. Now it's Dr. Cody, played by Alfre Woodard, who's a great actress.
Yes.
So you see her show up and you're like, oh shit.
I was so happy to see her, but her performance was like every adult in this movie.
I'm just brain dead.
Lackluster.
Yeah.
It was almost two-dimensional. And I was getting so frustrated that it was really, it was like working so weird. There was some people that were connecting this very quickly.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
They were going from vampire. And I'm like, how do you get to vampire? Like, come on. How do you get to vampires so quickly?
Yeah, in this movie, they jumped to that conclusion of vampires way too quickly for me too. Like, I'm just like, this is silly.
And there are other people that were just not getting it. They were just taking and it's like witnessing it, and it's like still, it was so slow. And still people not saying, none of the adults acted or said anything of significance. They were only reacting. The only person that I felt was the strongest of character within this world was the boy, right?
Okay.
I forget his name.
Yeah, Mark.
You have Mark, right? Played by Jordan Preston Carter. Mark Petrie. He was the only one. But then he got it in a way where he was like, hey, this is the vampires. So let me take all the things that I've been saving up to destroy a vampire and let me go kill vampires. Like, literally, he became the official vampire slayer of the town, but with total disregard of any safety, of any circumstances, proactive in getting rid of the vampires. Like, he literally was like, what, 11 or 12 years old saying, okay, I'm going to kill the head vampire now. You know, like, what are you guys doing? Oh, we're going to go talk to the priest. Oh, we're going to go to the pharmacy. And he was like, what are you doing? And like, I'm going to go to the big scary house and kill the vampire. Right. I told Rolando, it almost seemed like this movie was written by this young boy, that he wrote the screenplay for this, where he gets to be the hero and everything. And the adults, even his parents, totally clueless.
Oh,
totally
yeah, most
clueless.
certainly.
The priest. What a waste.
Okay, wait.
What an effing waste.
Now, hang on. I will. I want to come. I actually, this priest might be one of the few things I kind of liked what they tried to do with the movie. I'm not saying it was successful, but they tried to do something here that was successful, which is a man who is wrestling with his faith. And ultimately, what is his downfall is his lack of faith is why he's able to be killed by Barlow. I kind of like that aspect of it because that's something very typical of Stephen King. Stephen King loves to see the bastardization of religion. He usually makes a critique on that, right? There's always like a zealot of some sort in like his like a Bible thumper or someone who has lost their faith in a lot of his work. And this one, I thought it could have been better, but it was one of the few things that like I found memorable. Like when Barlow is just like, a man who loses his faith dies. I don't know what he said, but like, you know, he kills him.
He does say something like that too. Yeah.
I will say this much about the film. For a film that, I don't know, I feel like the trailer showed us so much more blood and gore that just was not in the movie. Because like they kept cutting away from like the violence, and I'm just like, why? Like, why bother then?
I'm like, what? I'm like, okay, all right. Sometimes I love a horror movie, not because of its great
violence,
none of the plot, but of the gore.
Oh, you like the gore? Okay.
Sometimes the gore, especially in vampire movies, and how cruel, like a vampire can be. Sometimes that is like, oh wow, that's a good movie because it's so crazy, right? It gives you these crazy images. But they didn't do anything with this stuff. Some of the stuff could have been really terrifying, and they really kind of held back.
They really did. Like they really cut away from the action way too much. Nicole, it looks like you were
I was going to say that this film almost feels like it's trying to make it an action movie, especially with like the way that it creates this whole like action set piece at the end. And it becomes like they kill off Straker. Very early in the film.
Very early. And also,
who kills him?
Yeah.
It was
Mark. And then it shows so weird. Like Mark comes from behind the door,
smacks him with like a crowbar, and then just a shadow, just like,
and you don't see it, right? You don't see it. It would have been horrifying to see it, because one of my things about horror movies is when the person doesn't have follow through, right? When the person who's trying to escape just hits the killer just once and walks away and say, oh, I probably got him by that one hit. But no, Mark continued until he made sure. We don't see that. I would have enjoyed the gruesomeness of that moment.
And not just about the gruesomeness though, because at this point you're seeing a little bit of character growth. Like this is a point where like he is no longer a child. Now he's like a man. He's literally had to murder to save his own life.
But Rolando, I didn't see character growth because I didn't know Mark any other way besides being a badass.
That's true. That's actually a fair point.
From the moment we see Mark, he is up against the bully of the school. He's the new kid. He's a new kid, so there's something different, right? Yeah. He's black and the new kid in this school, and the bully's already out to get him. And he's like, I'm not going to stop. And his new friends are like, hey, but how about if he brings the bigger kids? I'm not going to stop, because if you stop, then that's how they get you.
Yeah, actually, really good point. Fair point.
So he's a badass. So he was already the most developed badass character from the first scene.
Yeah.
Why are we going to the morgue thinking to investigate a vampire and not bringing holy water, stakes, or crosses? That's another thing too. Like this is my thing of when there were adults that were just kind of, okay, I think it's vampires, but I'm not sure. But
well, the doctor, she was in denial.
I know, but the other two weren't.
That's true.
Other two already saw shit.
Yeah, this movie was already. Yeah, this movie is just like kind of a little bit wacky all over the place. And then for some reason, for some godforsaken reason, I don't know why, I feel like the way they shot this, it must have been the frame rate that they used, but it makes it look even more soap opera-y. Like it does not it doesn't feel filmic. It just looks cheap.
It has that glossy streaming look to it, and it just doesn't look cinematic at all.
Not at all.
Yeah, bad choice with however they filmed it or what. I definitely think they tried to make it an action movie. There's a scene when they're all in the church, and then Mark comes in and they give him like this badass like the guy's here to save the day, and he says like some sort of line. I'm like, what the fuck is this movie doing? And at the end, it really does like it completely creates this whole set piece as if it's like super cool. But it's just like, why? And
silly.
Essentially, they've realized that the whole town, the town's empty. So they're like, oh my God, where is everybody? Sun's almost setting, by the way, because we've conveniently waited until the sun almost sets. And, oh, right. The movie theater, which is actually the drive-in movie theater. And all the townspeople are sleeping in their trunks of their cars, which are playing as coffins.
Which
Susan's
makes no
mom
sense.
Is now the familiar. It's no longer Straker. They introduced this character for some fucking reason. And Susan, she's sleeping and Ben is like attached and hoping that he can save her, which is, again, stupid. Mm-hmm. And then this whole set piece happens in the drive-thru theater with her in a shotgun and them trying to kill the vampires. And it's just bad.
It is bad. And the reason, I think, why do you think for you it's bad? Is it just like how it was just shot, how it's like just played out? Because I have a more, I guess for me, there's a storyline reason why I think it makes no sense.
Yeah, I think it felt way too much like an action movie, not enough horror elements. And it kind of felt like the song equivalent would be like those songs that go do, 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 and they build up to like a beat you've already heard a million fucking times. This whole movie is a build up for kind of nothing or something that I've already seen before.
Yeah. See, so for me, the reason this scene drove me crazy was because why would vampires sleep in a car outside in the sun? And more importantly, why are they waking up before the sun has set? Like, I feel like isn't there like some biological clock inside them that they know is just like it is time to go hunt? Like, no, they're coming out in daylight, meaning that they were susceptible to dying at any point. It was silly. It was stupid. It made no sense.
No, it was.
It kind of made vampires just as idiotic as the humans, to be quite honest.
It really did, and it made me miss that scene in the miniseries when they're in the cellar and they're killing Barlow, and the boys there. Mark's watching them, and you see that there's actually other people coming out of the shadows of the corners that are staying there. And you're like, you don't even notice it at first. And you're like, what the fuck? Like a surprise makes sense and is actually scary. Like, yeah, you're right. Nothing about this makes sense. It's literally just for an action set piece and it doesn't work. And this whole movie was just frankly quite stupid. Again, it just like every line felt like it wanted to be like cool and get reactions out of people. There were some shots that were nice. There were some match cuts in the editing. But like, other than that, it just felt, if I thought the acting was bland in the first miniseries, I had no idea what I was in store for here.
Did you see them in reverse? Like, did you see them in the order intended?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
So I think it didn't work for this movie. But this sequence would have worked if we were talking about The Lost Boys, right? Another action vampire movie, or an episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, right?
Yeah,
where we kind of expect the action and everything because you're just getting the fright, fighting the monster, but not the sense of the devastation, desecration of a community that's really being portrayed here. That this is a community. Remember, the whole idea of it being a small town is these people know each other. People grew up together. These people have a history with each other. And now they are infected by this. And that's it. The witnessing is the end of this community, the tragedy of this community of Salem's Lot.
Yeah.
Right? But what you do get is, once again, I'm all for this Mark kid having his own show. It's basically him doing 85% of all the killing, and then Ben coming in, killing two people, which happen to be the top two, emotionally, and then the main vampire.
Yeah, is this like a Stranger Things effect, do you think? like giving the hero the kids like these big action sets.
Maybe
I feel like after Stranger Things, like now,
because he kills all those vampires and he kills like Susan's mom.
Yes,
so good.
He does. He runs.
I loved it when he just like runs her over.
But but again, like this is what I'm saying. The one character that I liked, the doctor, she just got blown off, and that's it. We didn't have time to grieve or anything, right? I was just like, Jesus, like you finally gave me a character that I care about, and like she gets ripped away from us.
True.
And I'm like,
that's true.
This movie, the ending was just like whack. Well, and I also felt nothing for Susan becoming a vampire. Like I felt absolutely
nothing for her
didn't
at all.
care at all. I felt like, and she could have been very more definitely more developed. Like she had like, I went to the big city, but I had to come back, and my mom is trying to keep me here. She's being real possessive, and I have this ex-boyfriend is toxic. Mm-hmm. So there's like all these little things that we could have done with her. It could have get a little more Susan, but except for being kind of like this one-dimensional character. And also Ben, I felt I wish Ben was more.
I wish he was also more attractive.
I wish he had more lips. I've never seen him use. He had no lips. That's all I could see every time I saw him. Is like, this guy has no lips.
Yeah, Lewis Pullman. Yeah, and this is
is he related to Bill Pullman?
Yeah, that's his son. Mind blown.
Neppy.
This is more of your classical vampire story. This is more so based in religion, stakes, all that stuff works. And then it makes a turn. And then it kind of forgets all of that and it forget where it came from. And it's just more concerned with action set pieces. So yeah, this would have worked for Buffy or Lost Boys because it's been established that these vampires are, like punks who hang out on boardwalks. Mm-hmm. And so they would be sleeping in the trunks of their car. So yeah, like it just kind of forgot what it was based on, and it totally ignored the themes of the novel or even the original miniseries because I never read the novel, and just was vapid at the end of the day. And
that's a good word.
Last year, unfortunately, last year we did The Exorcist, and I talked about how you kind of can't do that anymore because when that film came out, it was so epic and monumental that it created a genre. And now, all these years later, we've seen the original film to the point where we're desensitized to it enough times. We've seen all of the remakes, the sequels, the versions of it. What do they call that? The ripoffs, right? Mm-hmm. And now we're revisiting it, and there's no way you can ever kind of match that. You kind of have to do your own thing instead of fan service or trying to recreate it.
Or just trying to just make it two people, right? Like that's what Exorcist believer try to do. It's just like now it's two kids.
Oh no, it's two people. Yeah, just doesn't work. It's kind of like after you've done The Omen, and we had the first Omen this year, but it's like how can you go from there when there's no more mystery anymore, right? Mm-hmm. Like when you first saw The Omen, you didn't know whether or not he was Satan's child or something like, but now we know, and now it's like and we do subsequent films. It doesn't work anymore. There's something about that uniqueness of the less is more before. And now we have too much. We have so much vampires. We have vampires created for romance, for horror. We have vampires for young adults. We have vampires for adults, all this shit. And we have different versions of these same vampires. So when you're revisiting Salem's Lot, it makes your task is even harder. Because now this isn't 1979 audience who only had, say, Bram Stoker and some British horror or whatever, and Nosferatu. We've had a plethora of vampires since then. And it makes it really hard. And not only that, we've had Salem's Lot.
Yeah.
Now, does that, though, what kind of task does that put upon filmmakers? Because it's not like we don't need these films. I mean, we technically don't. But, then it becomes the issue of like, well, then how do you make it completely your own and something that's worth retelling?
Great question. I don't, especially when it comes to like, are you talking about Salem's Lot or just in general, like, how do you tell a vampire story for modern audiences?
Or just in general, when it comes to something like this, we've been inundated with so much that it's just, we're kind of looking at it and we're bored by it.
Yeah, look, even that movie Abigail, for example, is a vampire story that came out, I think, this year, right? And that was another one where it's just it was fine, but like, it was a little tedious. And I don't know. I think it's just hard to do. It's hard to surprise anymore with like the vampiric story, right? You can't. It's hard. It's just a hard monster
It's hard
to kind of create stories with anymore. But
the classical one
but it's not impossible, right? Because I feel like we have seen introductions of new types of vampires that are more successful. For me, it would be the energy vampire, and we saw 2 iterations of that fairly recently in pop culture. That would be in the Shining sequel, Doctor Sleep, right? They were energy vampires. And then, but my favorite one has been in comedic effect would be Colin Robinson from What We Do in the Shadows. That's a great use of vampirism for comedic effect. And like the energy vampire of it is so different. The way it's portrayed, it's so silly and it's hilarious. So it's not to say that like you can't do something new. It's just the question is like, it's just more difficult. You have to really think outside the box. I don't know. The story. Oh wait, one last thing I want to say is, but like I said, Salem's Lot is very derivative of the Dracula story, and the reason Dracula has endured so much, it's because I feel like it's not that we all know it, right? But like the story on its legs makes sense, right? It's about an evil coming into town and slowly taking away your loved ones. I mean, obviously, Dracula is more about sexual repression, right? It's a classic story. And I just feel like the reason it's a classic and why we still love it is because it still works, right? So just, I don't know, they failed on this one, but like, I don't think that means that like I still can't be entertained by a vampire story.
No, but it's not that. Yeah, I don't know if it's that you can't be entertained, but if you tell a classical one in particular, you have your work put out for you, and you do have to do something, which is interesting because in a couple of weeks we're going to do vampires again. We're doing Nosferatu.
Oh, okay, yeah, which is like a ripoff
the
of
Robert
Dracula,
Eggers
right?
one. Yeah.
No, I'm looking for that one.
Which is, by the way, a remake of Nosferatu, not Dracula. Nosferatu is an illegal adaptation of Dracula.
Yes. I thought it was a ripoff, but yeah, it's just an illegal adaptation.
They didn't get the rights. They were getting sued, but they continued to do it anyway. So it's technically an adaptation, but they changed some things. So
okay,
I like to say illegal. It's a ripoff, but yeah, essentially.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, are we entering the age of the vampire again?
I don't know. I feel we always come around. Yeah. I think it becomes dormant for maybe 5 years, and then you get something,
and it comes back.
And then it comes back.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that could be it.
That talks about Twilight getting its own television show.
Oh God,
we need that. There's still that.
I'm still waiting for my Buffy like revival or remake.
I don't think. I hope not. Actually,
I don't know. I think we could do with a new. I love Buffy, but I'm also very open minded to see. It's just like we can definitely revitalize the story. Like we can update it. Let's make Buffy lesbian too. I think.
Yes, I would love that.
Like have her les out with Faith.
But an interesting take on vampirism was actually came from a book that Joe Hill, which is Stephen King's son, wrote, called Nosferatu. Oh. It's supposed to sound like Nosferatu, but it's a driver's license. What is it? The
driver's license?
No, not the driver's license plate. The license plate with NOS4A2. And that's like that's kind of a depiction of an energy vampire. He like sucks the souls of children.
Energy vampires are hot.
So
now I want to see that.
So and then that actually became a television show.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Okay.
And that was a pretty good story. That book was very good.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what but yeah, I don't know. Like, so funny that you brought up Exorcist again, because that's also being redone this time by Mike Flanagan. And they're going to be doing like a new sequel to follow up. I think they're undoing Exorcist Believer, and now we're getting another follow up to Exorcist.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah,
they won't ever learn.
I don't know. Of all people, Mike Flanagan's the one I'm willing to give a chance to.
Mike Flanagan knows how to do Stephen King. They should just give him Stephen King stuff.
Mike Flanagan, I feel like Mike Flanagan should just stick to doing ghost stories, and I need a new one every year. He didn't deliver this year because the contract with Netflix is over, and I'm so angry.
Yeah, I think he's moving on from Netflix.
He's supposed to be, he's under contract with Amazon, but he's also working with Blumhouse to do, I think he's working on 2 projects with them at the moment. One of them being the Exorcist one.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know. They should leave it alone, but we'll see.
They never will.
Okay.
They never will.
They never will. All right. Well, that's it for the spooky season. Aren't you glad that the spooky season's over? Or have you had enough of it?
No. I'm actually kind of disappointed this is how it ended, to be quite honest.
Really? Oh yeah. Well, we didn't end on a bang, but actually we haven't had the best month. Joker.
It's true. For a good year, this has been a little bit of a rough patch.
A little bit of a rough spooky season.
Hopefully Oscar season will help us get back into the swing of things feeling good.
This is true, yeah. And Eddie's super excited for next week's episode, so you guys are going to want to tune in for that.
I wish I knew what it was.
We want to hear from you guys, so let us know your thoughts. Email us, remakesrebootsrevivals@gmail.com, Instagram @remakesrebootsrevivals, Twitter @remakespodcast. Search on YouTube or Facebook for Remakes, Reboots, Revivals. You can search for us on our podcasting platform, Podbean, and you can see all of our episodes there, as well as on our website, remakesrebootsrevivals.com. We have a TikTok, and we are actively posting some social media clips on those. And last but not least, if you're listening on a podcasting platform, go on over and give us a rating. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please leave us a review. All right, cool. Well, happy Halloween, fellas.
Happy Halloween. We just had a Halloween party. You were there. You were Newsies. I was Sabrina Newsies. Carpenter. Eddie, what were you?
He was
Cocaine Bear.
Yeah.
All media properties. All media properties. We should have had a sticker of our podcast, I swear.
I even made it worse. I was like Cocaine Care Bear, actually.
That's right. Yeah. Everyone at first thought you were Care Bear. It was actually pretty adorable. And then you were like the white on the nose, guys. Yeah. All right. Well, I hope you enjoy your holiday. And I hope everybody out there has a great holiday and stay safe.
Stay safe, yeah. Get candy. Get lots of candy.
Get lots of candy. Get your tummies full. Mm-hmm. And until next time,
stay unoriginal.